First off. Okay, genius. All right, so let me share my screen here. And we hit, so many things. Slideshow. All right, so welcome to my honors capstone presentation, Let Her Live, a devised theater piece. So here's my abstract. From 2015 to 2021, the devised show Let Her Live has made some drastic changes and is now ready to be presented again in a stage reading format. After 2 months of editing the script with a group of writers that vary in gender identity, I got somebody else here. The script will now be rehearsed for a week by a group of Millikan actors under the direction of Professor Tony Morton and project leader Jared Scott, and performed publicly for the Millikan and general populations. There we go. So some history of the show and my involvement with it. I grew up in Richmond, Virginia, and I did a performing arts program called Spark, which was the School of Performing Arts in the Richmond community. And my director there let us know that she was helping start a pioneer program with the Richmond Triangle Players and Theater Lab, which were two professional theaters in the city of Richmond, to create the Spectrum program, which was a LGBTQIA group for theater artists in high school, whether they're queer or allies, people who wanted to be a part of something queer and theater related, which is where we had the inaugural production of Let Her Live. So I'm sure some of you are wondering, what is a devised theater piece? So devised theater is a type of theater that aims to produce original works by a collective group of individuals. And the process usually starts with some improvisational games and icebreakers to help the group open up, get more comfortable with each other, know each other on a deeper level. And after they get to that point, they kind of start to throw ideas around, what are things that I'm passionate about? What are things that you're passionate about? And how can we bring all these things together to find a common topic that everybody can be passionate about? And then they engage in writing prompts and research about the chosen topic. And then once they kind of get all of that together, they kind of conglomerate it all into piecing together parts of a show. So the original production, as I mentioned, were queer high school students and allies with queer and allied mentors listed there. I do want to give them credit because this wouldn't exist without all of them. So there they are, feel free to read. But the chosen topic that we looked at, we did this in 2015. And in 2015, that was kind of like when the first start of transgender started to come into the general population's eye. And the reason why was because of the deaths of Jennifer Gable and Lila Alcorn, who are transgender women here in America. Jennifer Gable was a trans woman who transitioned over a decade before her death, and she died of natural causes and was buried by her family as a man and using her dead name. And they basically ignored an entire 10 years of her life and kind of stripped her of her identity in her final moments on Earth. And then Lila Alcorn was a teenage trans girl who committed suicide due to societal standards and, her parents' pressure to deny her identity. And when Tumblr was still a big thing, she was on there and she left a note that she hoped that her death would spark conversations about what's going on and discrimination and lack of support and all this stuff for trans individuals. And so we wanted to take all of that and bring it into a show. So the original goal for the production was to create an informative piece that explored what it meant to be queer and more specifically transgender, and how people from varying backgrounds would react to that identity. So I'll get into this a little bit more when I start to explain the characters, but we wanted to make sure that in the show, we didn't just explore what it meant to be an ally, because, allies seem to want to do their own research, but people who aren't allied or people who can't understand or choose not to understand, that was an audience that we wanted to reach. And so part of the research that we did was we wanted to look at as many terms that were used in the queer world and really make sure that we had an understanding of what those words meant and how they came into play, specifically with these stories that we were trying to tell. So some specific ones that we used for this show were cisgender, coming out, gender expression, gender identity, homophobia, LGBTQIA, oppression, outing, preferred gender pronoun, prejudice, obviously transgender and transition, and stereotype. So we worked with a lot of these things. And as you'll see later, we even incorporated some definitions into the show. So that way the audience members could hear words that they might have in their vocabulary, but not fully understand what they mean. And so that was a big part of what the research was for the original production. So something really cool that we did was when we did the original production, we had what's called a zine, which is short for magazine, but it's basically a magazine that you put together based on a general idea or concept. And so instead of like a program that you would get when you came to see the show, you got a zine. And so the first few pages were, blurbs about each of the actors, each of the mentors, why we chose Spectrum, our background. And then we had 4 pages listing all of those terms that I just showed you on this slide. Every single one of those, we had a definition for a queer informed definition of all of those terms for the audience to get familiar with. And then at the end of the packet, at the end of the zine, we had these 2 pages, which was just a trans frequently asked questions page. So what does the word transgender mean? What is identity and gender expression? What is the difference between sex and gender? What does it mean to transition? Preferred gender pronoun? Like all these things that, even myself going into it, I didn't know about all this stuff. And we wanted to make sure that anyone who came to see the show wasn't sitting there confused, that they had the resources at their fingertips to fully grasp, or at least try to grasp what the story was that we were telling. So the original stage reading, here's a picture of us, a bunch of high schoolers, and it was presented at Richmond Triangle Players on January 18, 2015 at 2 p.m. And we got to hold a talk back after the show. And a talk back is basically where the audience who comes to see the show gets a chance after the show to kind of unpack what they just saw. And this often happens with original works, because not only do the audience need clarification sometimes, but so do the authors, right? We have to know, was our storytelling effective? Was the writing effective? Did it flow nicely? Did it, you have all these theatrical elements to worry about, but when you're telling a story with a purpose, you also have those type of things to worry about. Did the message come across? So this is a picture from that talkback that we had. Oh, come on. There we go. So a staged reading, both the original production and the production that we just did right before Thanksgiving were staged readings. And so a staged reading is basically a theatrical performance without any technical elements or staging. So typically the cast will dress up in all black. They'll read the script at music stands, which are printed out in binders. And the reason why we do staged readings is not to be lazy, not to do anything like that, but we want the focus to be on the actual text rather than, oh, look at those gorgeous lights and look at those costumes and that blocking or choreography was fantastic. We just want the focus to be on the actual text. And especially with a show like this where, well, I'll explain this in a little bit more, but a lot of it was just like long monologues. It gets harder to direct a clear call to action if you're worrying about blocking and lights and sound and mics and all that kind of stuff. So we chose to do a staged reading. So the show is a capstone project. I'm a senior BFA acting major, and I'm looking to pursue a master's in directing and or actor training. And I spent the past few semesters as a classroom assistant for classes in the acting programs freshman through senior year. And I also co-directed some productions. And so directing a staged reading kind of seemed like the perfect choice for my capstone presentation, because not only would I get to work on a show that I had already worked on and already had opinions about and could bring new opinions into that, but it would give me an opportunity to learn and grow as a director, which is something I'm wanting to do post-graduation this semester. So the process. In April 2021, I reached out to the original writing team, the cast and mentors from the original 2015 production. I had some great response initially. And then as we got closer to the August, September date, a lot of them had to pull out because, you know, they're all working professionals now. So they couldn't necessarily dedicate the time that they wanted to give to this production. So because of that, I reached out on social media in August and September to recruit members of the trans and non-binary community to be a part of the new editing team. That was pretty successful. And I was able to get Nat Long, who's another student here at Millikan, to be a part of that. And two people from the original production did stay on, and one other person from my hometown where I went to high school, who is also trans, came in and worked on that as well, which was great. So because once we'd gotten all that together, in October and November, we began editing on a bi-weekly basis. So we met for about an hour to an hour and a half every 2 weeks with a new editing team, which all those humans are listed right there. And by November 1st, we had a completed script. What was cool about the fact that this was a staged reading and that I got to be a part of the editing and writing team for the original production and this one was that, you know, even once we had this finalized script, we got into rehearsals November 15th through the 19th, and we were still making changes, right? You can kind of think you know what you want, and then you hear it in people's mouths and you're like, maybe cut that, or let's switch that, or let's have, you know, this character join in on the ensemble lines. And which lines do they not say, and all that kind of stuff we got to play with once we got into rehearsal. And then November 20th at 5 p.m. we had a stage reading performance in Quaker Hall. So for our first meeting, we had 3 total meetings. We just kind of went over some questions, which are listed here. And one of the things that I wanted to point out, it's 2A, one of the things that I was struggling with was how do we update this script to make sure that it is still telling an authentic story that will reach audiences in 2021, knowing that we know so much more now than we did 6 years ago. And so when we were looking at how relevant it was, we decided that it would be better to keep the show as a time capsule of what it was like to be trans or an ally or not in 2015, rather than having it take place in 2021. We didn't think that updating all that stuff would really serve it. So we decided to keep that. And these are some other questions that we asked as well, that kind of helped us get a jumping off point. Yeah. So the second and third meetings were a little bit more to the point. The second meeting, we divided up the editing process between the 5 people who were involved. We said, okay, Nat, what scenes do you want to look at? Atlantis, what scenes do you want to look at? And kind of did that together. And then we went through each of the 8 characters and made specific descriptions about them. One of the reasons that we did this was because we wanted to make sure that for each scene that we were editing, that we were creating clear human characters. And, you know, in editing, sometimes you can get a little lost. And so having clear character descriptions kind of helped guide us through that editing process. So that for the third meeting, we could go through and look at each edit that everyone had made for the scenes and approve a final version of the script. So the show, the synopsis of the show consists of 6 scenes in 1 act, a prologue, 4 duet scenes between the 8 actors, and an epilogue. So the show surrounds a fictional version of the combined Jennifer Gable and Leila Alcorn named Olivia or Liv Smith. Similar to Gable, she died of natural causes at a young age and was buried by her parents and family as a man, or as her dead name, Oliver. The play consists of the people in her life reacting to her death and the funeral that followed. So the rest of the show, I'll let you read through these, but if you'll notice, there's 8 characters, and if you group them in 2s, those were the 2 people who would be in each scene. So the prologue, all of them were in it. First scene, Lizzie, Beth, and Charlie. Second scene, Sophia and Morgan. Third scene, Victoria and Wes. Fourth scene, Alex and Hannah. And then again, the epilogue, everybody was in it. And so the reason why we split these up into 2 persons per scene, we wanted to highlight different topics in each of those scenes. So for example, with Lizzie, Beth, and Charlie's scene, we kind of discussed what it meant to be a part of her family without being a direct member of her immediate family, and how Liv's presence in their lives as extended family or maid family affected them. for Sophia and Morgan, they were two love interests. Sophia was a high school love interest when Liv was still going by Oliver, and Morgan was a character who came along after Liv transitioned, and how their love for Oliver were shown in different ways. And Victoria and Wes were good friends, and Alex and Hannah were truly more like siblings. But in each of those scenes, we wanted to have a character who was more antagonistic and a character who was more allied, and see how they could be feeling the same things, but have them mean completely different things. So that's why we chose to split up the script that way. So some general notes on the editing continued was we wanted to point out that the story wasn't so much about Liv, rather than it being about the people reflecting on her death, how they were all affected in different ways, knowing what they knew about her, having the experiences that they had with her. And we also recognize that, Millikan is a liberal arts campus, and we do have a lot of queer people here. But when it comes to gender and transgender and non-binary and all that stuff, we have a pretty limited population. So we knew that this specific iteration of the show was more likely to reach majority cisgendered audiences than transgender non-binary audiences. And so we wanted to make sure that we were humanizing the antagonistic characters, the ones who didn't quite understand Liv's transition or the ones who didn't support her, in order to not alienate audience members who might in some way, shape, or form relate to these characters. And the reason why we did this was because if you create characters who are just evil, they're just bad people, anyone who hears their point of view as an audience member might shut down and stop listening, and that we wanted to avoid completely. So we wanted to encourage cisgendered audience members to be advocates and use this story as a jumping off point for their own research and education about the gender binary and the trans or non-binary lived experience. So I've got some clips of the show here to show you all. This is a clip of the prologue. I'm over here reading the voiceover, so I'll be reading the obituary for Liv Smith, and these are all of my actors. So yeah, here we go. In memory of Oliver.
What?
No.
Oliver was called home to the kingdom of heaven too soon last Friday.
Oliver? Oliver?
Man.
God needed another angel and took our precious son. He passed away suddenly while at work.
Son?
May you rest in peace.
Oliver, 25, was born March 1st, 1989.
Oliver? Oliver, dude. I can't believe you're gone. Olivia, I can't believe they would do this to you.
He grew up to be an active member of the First Christian Church, where he was baptized and confirmed.
I always thought I would see him again. I never thought I would have to see her like this.
Oliver attended State University on a presidential scholarship for 4 years. While there, he studied business and later political science.
This is absurd. This is awful. This isn't her. Where is she?
Oliver played the piano and guitar.
Yes, Olivia did. And the ukulele.
He had a lovely tenor voice and was a member of chamber singers while in high school.
She and I would sing Lady Gaga and Against Me until our voices gave out.
He enjoyed reading his Bible and sharing fellowship with the Lord.
Those were our best times. I can't believe they're over.
She led rallies and marches, stood up for what she believed in.
Oliver was a quiet young man.
Yeah, but he was always there for me until...
Olivia was a vivacious young woman, an activist, filling any room with warmth and welcome.
He is survived by his parents and his younger sister, Hannah.
Surviving, yes, but only barely.
Liv didn't even talk to them after.
Visitation will be held at 2 p.m. on Sunday, January 18th, 2015.
I have to be there.
He would have wanted me to be there for his parents.
She would have wanted me to be there to protect her from her parents.
I have to say goodbye. I can't say goodbye to her like that.
This isn't what she would have wanted. I wonder if he would want me there.
What am I supposed to do?
Olivia,
What happened to you?
So that's just a little clip to give you an idea of how the prologue and epilogue went. They were kind of opportunities for each of the characters to react to what they were reading. So in the prologue, they're reacting to the obituary that the family wrote, where they were using Oliver and he, him pronouns and kind of ignoring the transition that she went through. And then in the epilogue, instead of an obituary, we have an open letter written by her friends and those affected by her death, published in her university's newspaper. Yeah, so that is kind of how that went.
Oliver.
Nope. There we go. So this is an example of the use of the research that we did in the actual script. So one of the things that we felt was very important was to give actual definitions of slurs that people tend to throw around without thought. And so you can see here in the scene with Victoria and Wes, they use the F slur, the D slur, the T slur, and then the he, she slur. And Victoria, this character who is all about words and her love of words and what they mean and how they reflect culture, she points out how all of these words that are used as slings and arrows against queer people, they don't actually mean what we think they mean. We've just endowed them with these harmful meanings. And so we thought that it would be really interesting to show people they're choosing when they use these words to use them with malice. And use that as an opportunity to educate audience members who might use these words or know people that use these words, what they actually mean and how they're making a conscious choice to be unkind, ignorant, all of those buzzwords. So yeah, I'll give you a second to read over that real quick. Hopefully you've had a chance to look at it while I was talking, so I'll go ahead and move on. So a call to action for the audience. This is a clip from the last scene in the show between Alex, who is kind of a member of Liv's maid family. And when we talk about maid family in the queer community, it basically means members of your community who have come to be like family to you. And there are people that, we always say you can't choose who your family is, but sometimes when you are alienated and, kicked out by your family, you have to make your own. So Alex over here is a non-binary individual who became kind of a member of Liv's maid family. And then this character, Hannah, is her actual little sister. And so this is an example of the call to action that I will get to in a second.
You are the definition of an extrovert. Outgoing, sure of yourself.
Secluded, confused. I always dreamed of having that sibling that I could do everything with. That one that I could learn from, I could lean on. That was supposed to be you. I don't blame you for leaving me alone. I don't even blame you for being a girl. I wish that I could see you again. God, I'm just fucking pissed. You spent your life hiding and I never got to tell you that I love you. That's right. I love you. I love my sister. But I bet you never knew that.
This sucks. I mean, how could you just be gone? How am I supposed to live my life without you in it? Dear God, Liv, who am I going to call at 2 o'clock in the morning when I finish watching Scandal and need someone to talk to? Who am I supposed to talk to when I have questions about what the difference between concealer and foundation is because I still have no fucking clue? I think the thing that makes me so mad is that I am mad. I'm mad at you for something that was completely out of your control. And yet, I'm still mad at you. But I still love you. Regardless of everything, I just miss you. Wow. You look just like her. Your little sister? Oh, honey, I am going to get your shit together.
So yeah, that's a quick example. But to get to the main point, the call to action for the audience is to grow and learn. So there were 4 kind of antagonistic characters. They were all characters who struggled to understand their relationship to Liv as a woman. And they came around kind of in different ways, either by the end of their scene or by the end of the epilogue. They have a changed point of view about the whole situation. They've had their opportunity to speak their piece, and now they are reflecting on what they can do moving forward. And for all of these characters, their growth is relative, right? Just as growth is in real life. People learn on their own time and they don't change overnight, and neither do these characters. For them to just do a complete 180 switch and be like, I completely understand now, would detract from the meaning of the piece, because audience members can't expect to have that kind of transition for themselves. And then we don't want them kicking themselves if they see a show where, you know, everyone easily comes around and comes to this understanding. And so the goal was to have all of these characters have their perspectives highlighted to help any audience members who are questioning the validity of trans and non-binary identities, and identify with these characters and see their humanity as well as their growth, and let that encourage them to move forward. So what's the future of this play? I would love to submit the script to universities for them to perform. I think it tells an important story. I think it brings an important message. But as of right now, I've only had 3 college-aged white queer eyes on this show. And as it grows with society, we'll likely reach more queer audiences. And that means the story will have to reach 2 different groups. Whereas before I kind of mentioned, this story is more about reaching cisgendered people. As the show grows and as our society grows, it's more likely to reach more than just cisgendered audiences. And so we need to make sure that there are meaningful ways that the show is affecting audience members and giving them all a call to action. And the script would have to reflect that in order for it to continue to serve a purpose. All right. And that's it. Yay. I've got 10 minutes now for anybody to ask questions. I'm going to go ahead and stop the share and bring it back. Does anybody have questions? Feel free. You can use the little raise your hand button, or you can drop them in the chat, or you can just unmute. That works too. Go for it, Audrey.
What was like the casting process for the show for you?
So the casting process was interesting. I knew that I needed to have actors who could think quick and on their feet, because we really only had 4 days of rehearsal, and half of those rehearsals, we didn't have all of our actors there. And so I went ahead and pre-cast it. I didn't hold auditions, but because I was so directly familiar with the script, I was able to look at the actors that I had at my disposal and say, who fits this right? And there was only one character that needed a specific casting type, which was the character Morgan. She was played and written by a Black woman, and we wanted to make sure that we didn't erase that just because we didn't have too many Black women available. And so that was a very specific search. But I'm glad it was a specific search, because that story is, it tells a different story than the entire rest of the white or white passing cast. So that was a bit of a challenge, just because Milliken is a PWI, and you know, there's a limited group, but we got to work with a new actress who hasn't gotten a lot of performance experience here at Milliken, and she did a fantastic job. So that was a really wonderful happenstance. Anybody else have questions? Thank you for that question, Audrey.
What was like one of the most joyful moments or your favorite moments during the process?
To bring back the conversation to the part played by the Black female, her character's name is Morgan. She has a line at the end of her duet scene where she's one of the only characters who really directly and intentionally says something to Liv. and she has this sort of struggle through her scene with her relationship with God. And by the end of the scene, she says, Liv, if heaven is real, then I'll meet you at the gates. And our actress was kind of having a little bit of trouble initially connecting to that and being open and vulnerable about it. And she had this kind of tendency to like smack her arms on her sides during it because she didn't quite know how to just let herself be open and vulnerable. And once we got that out of her through some coaching and some direction from me, when she finally let that be what it was just so powerful, and it brought me to tears. And that was just a really special moment that I'm always going to remember. Yeah, Audrey.
What would you say you learned as a director through this process, and like how are you going to take that after you graduate?
I think one of the hardest parts as a director is learning when to let go, right? You're never going to see your work and not have notes, right? You're always going to look at it and be like, oh, I wish I would have said that, or oh, I wish I would have said that. And especially in such a quick rehearsal process, I had to pack in a lot very quickly. And they were a lot of nitpicking notes because they weren't really working in scenes with one another. They were kind of having their own moments that happened to overlap in certain parts. But what I think I learned most about it is, as I said, by the final, night of rehearsal, I just had to sit and watch and let the actors do their thing. And I think that is a really valuable lesson, because I am kind of the control freak. I love to have my little hands on every little thing and, make sure, this is reflecting me, so it has to be perfect. But as a director, you can only do so much. You only put so many pieces together in the puzzle. At a certain point, you have to leave it up to the actors to fill in the rest of those little pieces with their own true selves and their own skill. So I think that is definitely what I learned. I learned many things, but that is probably the biggest one. Any other final questions?
I just want to make a comment for the recording, since Dr. Hartsock had to step out. I would just like, for the record, Jared handled this very sensitive subject with professionalism and great care from the jump, and ran his casting rehearsal process. Really, I had to do nothing as the advisor, other than just listen to where he was at, show up to a couple of rehearsals, and he was pushing the ball up the hill, as they say, or whatever. And it went very well. It went very well. I was very pleased at the finished product and the journey of getting there as well.
Yay. Thank you, Tony. Anybody else have questions before I let you go? Yay. Well, thank you all for coming. I really appreciate your time, and enjoy the rest of your Wednesday.
Great job, friend.
Thanks, friend.
Bob,
Bye, folks.
so proud of you.
Bye, Jared. I'd stay and talk, but I got another meeting. So.
All right. Bye, everybody.
Bye.